Welcome to Objections with C. Stanley Willis. I am C. Michael Morris. Senior, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I thought we would pick up, last week we talked about the Rittenhouse case and all the information that might be lacking that people didn't know. Here's what I want to talk about now.
Oh, cool.
The media trying this case before it even took place, and then the spin out from that when it either went the way one side wanted or went against what the other side wanted. You and I both watch different things, and then kind of come together in the middle. Like, we never disagree, right? That's the whole thing. We just talk facts.
Okay, for sure.
About news stuff. We disagree about everything else. But what I was I wasn't amazed at, but it was like the OJ trial.
Uh-huh.
If you remember, there's a Time magazine where they showed a college, and everybody that was black was on one side and everyone was white on the other. And I only remember it because it just, I don't know that it was on purpose. I think it just happened to be that way. And all the white people were crying and the black people were cheering. That was the cover. Now, right. Time had put OJ on the front of the magazine holding his Roman numerals of what prisoner he was. So they were just for stirring it up.
Right.
But I always remember that because I thought, why would you be, it has nothing to do with you. Why would you care either way? But yet people seem to care about this result more than anything. But it's media driven that you're supposed to care.
Oh yeah, it's the media as a whole, and again, you know,
they are holes, a-holes.
We have to talk about it. We have to talk about them kind of globally, but it's a stereotype, and stereotypes. You know, the problem with stereotypes is that they're not 100% accurate. You know what I'm saying? There.
Other than all white men are good at basketball.
Is that one?
I always get them mixed up. I never remember which one's which.
Well, but the problem with stereotypes is exactly that. They're not 100% true. There are strata within all of that. But when I look at the media as a whole, during the Trump administration, the media, especially on the left, which kind of is a meaningless statement, but I got to use it because I got to be able to talk about it. So the media, especially on the left, kind of announced we are no longer neutral. They actually, there were several people who said, we're not going to be neutral about this. Right. We're going to take this guy out of office. We're going to take this guy down at all costs. And when that happened, then, of course, over a period of time, the media on the other side, of course, went to their extreme of defending all things Trumpian in nature. And so now that hasn't backed off. In fact, if you watch CNN, all you hear about is Trump. Why is anybody still talking? Isn't he retired? I mean, why are we still talking about this guy?
It would be like talking about Reagan still. Right. It's like he's not going to pass any policy.
Right. Yeah.
One that I know of. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak for Ronald Reagan.
He probably can vote. But
he can vote in Illinois, California, Arizona. Apparently he can.
That's just a joke. But anyway, so what you have is you have this media divide, and it's not even they're involved in kind of it's become almost religious in nature. I mean, and we can talk about, you know, the decrease in Christianity and what that's done to the country, but I think one of the effects of the overall citizens in the country becoming a-religious in nature is everybody's going to be religious at some level, right? So
you have to have a belief statement. You have to be tethered to something.
Everybody's going to have a belief system that is, and that's what religion does, is it feeds your belief system. It instills. So everybody's going to have one. So even if you're an atheist, you have a belief system of some kind. Well, what I see in the media, both on the right and the left, is this ideology that they have that they're pushing is their religion. It's what's filling the void from not having a long-standing religion to rely on to inform their system of right and wrong. And so now you have this kind of religious fervor that these guys are talking about, and you can see it in the self-righteousness that they have when they're talking. I mean, some of these people, the things that they're saying, sometimes they're even internally contradictory, but it doesn't matter. They say it loudly with religious fervor, and we, the people, are somewhat being influenced by that religious fervor that these people
I would say we are definitely. I mean, take the corporate media out, and let's talk about there is no if you want to talk about things that are, and again, we're going to talk about right and left on another show, what that actually means. But with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these things, there is so much censorship on one side that it's almost like you're being indoctrinated. Like, if you don't believe in this, you can't really fight back, right? What I used to like about this country is for a while we had freedom of speech. Right. And it was fantastic because we could disagree. We could have a conversation and disagree. Mm-hmm. Now it's not that. It is labels are being thrown at you if you have a dissenting opinion.
Well, no, and again, it just goes back to that's why it's like a religion. It's like, you know, it's like if you say something that disagrees with somebody, it's not that you just disagree with something that is an idea. You're disagreeing with a firmly held belief that is integral to their nature, and you're challenging their God. That's the reaction that you get, and it's completely. It's completely. You can't even debate with it, right? If somebody's coming at you with some kind of with these kinds of things that you come at either on the far left or the far right, these kinds of things that they come at you with, there's no argument, right? There's no way to argue with that because so much of what they have, they're just taking as axiomatic. It's presuppositional.
Or gospel.
Yeah, it's presuppositional.
Right.
It's like you can't challenge that. That's the basis of my religion. You can't. It's like the argument, you know, the famous argument between Christians and atheists about whether God exists. You know, it comes down to presuppositional things. Your belief system comes down to that, right? So you can explain anything away if you want to, based upon your presuppositions.
Well, it kind of goes back to the movie Network. I think we talked about it before. Howard Beale.
Okay.
When he's yelling at the audience, and if you haven't seen Network, everything that's happening right now is a movie from the 70s. They were saying this as you wouldn't believe it if you saw it, and now it's literally happening. But he said, your almighty God is your television, whatever's coming out of that box. So when you're watching it, because I have friends that are on all different spectrums, and I have one that literally they same routine. They'll get their Chipotle when they get home from work. They'll sit in front of MSNBC and they'll watch it from 4 o'clock until 10 o'clock. No one ever comes on there that has a dissenting opinion. And then I have family members that will only watch Fox, and they can tell me everything that happened on there. If you're only getting it from one source,
right?
It's kind of like when I have a conversation, I don't care if I'm right. I'm trying to learn something. Right. So when I say something that's wrong,
right,
tell me why it's wrong. If we can't have a flowing conversation where I'm better off for having this conversation, now all we do is yell at each other, right?
Right. And we've lost, in all this, we've lost the art of being able to have discussions about things and come to either agreement, a consensus, a compromise, or just an agreement that we're going to disagree and it'll be okay. I mean, you know, before all this happened, I can remember having conversations with people with whom I was diametrically opposed with on most issues, but we could still be friends, play golf, and hang out because we could have discussions and they were sane discussions. Nobody got angry. Nobody yelled and screamed. Nobody threatened the other person. Nobody felt like that they were being completely insulted because there was disagreement. You have rational conversations as an adult. And through some of those things, I mean, the things that I believe and think and the way that I think about the world now is vastly different than it was 10 years ago. That was different than it was 20 years ago, and that was different than it was 30 years ago, and that was different than it was when I was growing up. I mean, if you enter into things and you listen to what people have to say and you pick out the good and you throw out the bad and you kind of decide and observe and mature and grow, then you actually, I mean, that's the point of the free speech. That's the point of the way that our founding fathers wanted to do things, is so that we could grow and learn and mature and get better because of the freedom people had to bring their ideas in. Well, now what you have is, I don't want to hear your ideas. I don't want to hear what you have to say. In fact, I'm going to make it illegal for you to talk. Not only do I not want to hear your ideas, if you talk, I want you in jail. I mean, that's the world that we live in. What people don't understand about that is, I mean, that's the Hitler path. That's the Mussolini path. That's the Stalin path. That's you put all your dissenters in jail. But what happens when you become the dissenter? I mean, what happens when the tide turns on you? I mean, and if you have a doubt, read Bonhoeffer. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer talks about this. He's like, they came for the Jews and we didn't say anything. They came for these people and we didn't say anything. Then they came for us. We had no defense. I mean, it's all fun and games till it turns on you.
Right.
And
well, we've seen that, right? We've seen that with Governor Cuomo. We've seen it with the Weinsteins and all. You're pointing fingers, and when it gets pointed back at you,
right,
there's no one to defend you,
right? Because
you've been one of the people that were amping this up. But again, I think we learned a lot more through the pandemic, that there is one group and they're running things and we're not in that group.
Right.
And they're going to seize control. They don't want to give it back. And they're using the media, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's MSNBC, NBC, Fox, whatever it is. It's a control method. Because if I can get you to have groupthink, you won't break apart and you'll be too afraid, because I always find the weakest people are the loudest people. And that's what Twitter's about. The person who literally wants to run you up and down about whatever you just said or whatever you posted is the person that literally needs to be punched in their ass. But they're so far away they won't.
Did he just say that?
I didn't want to say face because that sounds violent. But again, it
that
is.
That just sounded weird.
We've got a.
Gross.
I'll draw it. Nate, give me a piece of paper. I think that we've conditioned people that the farther away, like you brought up religion, the farther away I am from another human being, the more likely I am to spout off because there's no repercussion.
Right.
We don't see physical violence like we used to, right? You'd see union disputes in the 50s and 60s, and those guys would be punching each other in the face and striking and all that. That's not how it is anymore. Now it is mob rule. So if you're the dissenter and you're on the outside, you're going to stay quiet because there's 100 people to me just standing on this corner. We've used the media to do the exact same thing. And I hate it because I'm in the media, right? Right. If I could tell you that it literally is like Oz, somebody pulls that curtain and you see someone reading something off a teleprompter that somebody else wrote for them, that is not their opinion. It is the opinion of whoever wrote this.
Well, you've seen all the things on the internet where they have like
the Sinclair broadcast.
They have newscasts from all over the country, and they're all saying exactly the same things, and so that just tells you that there's central control over the way that the news is being.
It's very 1984.
Yeah, it's kind of frightening and shocking in a lot of ways, and
it won't change because there's not enough. The corporations are funded by.
It will change. It will either change or it will break down. It will not.
Well, it's breaking down. That's the issue, is that people aren't tuning in.
Right.
So they're losing money. So what's happened is, and you can look this, there's an article about it. Bill Gates is funding the news. Pfizer is funding the news. Now, the problem is no one's watching it, but they are keeping it propped up. The minute that they have to actually produce a rating or a result, that's when it's going to fall apart, because people aren't watching television. They're streaming.
Right.
How am I going to get to you in a streaming effort? I can't because there's no commercials in streaming.
Right.
So broadcast television, radio, these other things are being affected. Eventually, the method's going to be I'm going to have to run ads on Disney Plus. They're going to have to open it up because that's where all the people went. I think people are dissenting in terms of I'm not going to turn it on anymore.
Well,
I don't want to hear it.
And you look at some weird things. I mean, like the Biden administration's approval ratings dropping dramatically. The viewership for networks like CNN and dropping dramatically. I think that on the whole, and again, I kind of agree with Charles Barkley on this. I think that most people really aren't interested in all this crap on the edges. I think that most people really just kind of, all right, let's do the right thing. We might disagree about the right thing, but let's do something that's closer to the middle. That's the right thing. Then rather than doing all this stuff on the edges, let's try to fix the problems, but let's really address the problems rather than just trying to throw money at the problems or whatever else it is that we think that might be a solution. Why don't we work on actually finding a solution? And I think most people are in that camp. I think that most of the noise comes from the 10% on the extremes. And the problem is that the people on the extremes are, like I said, they're religious zealots. This is not just a kind of political viewpoint or a social viewpoint or an opinion that they have. This is like a religious belief for them. And because they're religious zealots, they're willing to spend their entire lives in pursuit of the religion, which is kind of wacky.
Your take on that, you think the media at some point will change. Do you think that people will change with it?
I don't think the media will change. I think it will be its influence will be reduced, and I think you're seeing that happen. And I think you're going to see that happen more. I think that people will train. Things are happening now. Dynamic forces are happening all over the place that are really challenging, I think, almost every aspect of how we do life in our country. I think that, you look at the problems with the global supply chain. You look at the fact that we have now outsourced nearly all of our production ability for things that we need, like steel and things that we manufacture. We've outsourced all that. The idea that farming is a big corporate activity and that we're doing this on a macro scale to try to do a lot. I think a lot of these things are under attack right now, not necessarily directly, but indirectly through not only the politicizing of our society, but also through the economic policies that we've been running all these years, and I think that probably, there's a chance all that collapses on its own. There's a chance that happens. It looks like it's unraveling now. So there's a chance that it all unravels. There's a chance that, but in the midst of that, the hope that we have is that the United States went through something very similar to this in the 60s and 70s. We had riots, we had lots of racial turmoil.
The Doors.
We had the Doors. I miss the Doors. We had Vietnam, so we had a war. We had a very unpopular president. We haven't
done those things. Popular presidents. We're not doing any wars anymore. I mean, there's 7 other ones, but we're going to get to those eventually.
There's a whole freaking bunch of wars. Well, what I'm saying is that through the 80s and into the late 90s, the United States was able to kind of self-correct. So the nice thing is that the way the system's set up, if we don't dismantle the system, which is kind of what appears to be in process, if we don't dismantle the system, there is the ability for the majority of people and for the political will of people who have better intentions. There is the ability for the United States to correct itself. That still exists. But the farther we go down this road, the farther we go down this divisiveness road, the farther we go down this road with the government and the wealthy folks all being in league together to kind of manipulate things and destroy things, the longer we go down this road, the harder it is to self-correct. And, so that's where I think as a country we are. It's not necessarily a happy place to be, but it is a place to be.
But if you looked at the history of this country, there's always some kind of tumult that happens economically within the people, but the change that comes out of it seems to be more prosperous. What I don't see is that typically, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. You never see a Republican win for 12 years in a row, or a Democrat, right? So it's always 4 or 8 years and then things switch. It's almost like I gave you the keys to the car, just don't wreck it. And now it's being wrecked because a lot of things are being, let's say, tried.
Right.
And it's almost like there's a reason we didn't do it this way. Like all you had to do was keep this on the road. Something will come along in a couple years to correct this, I would think. But it seems...
I would hope that would.
Well, it seems like we're putting people in a position like the person they want to put in charge of, not the treasurer, I forget what she's up for, but she literally wrote a book about how communism, she wants to see the United States fail as a 30-year-old. That's not the person I want writing checks or saying what we're going to do things.
And the problem is that attitude is, I think, somewhat prevalent within the people in the United States that are in I guess you'd say the ruling class or the elite folks. That attitude that the United States needs to be destroyed or dismantled is pretty prevalent amongst those folks, and that's new. That's a new thing. You can't. You could argue that the Roman Empire, the ruling class, was grossly incompetent, and that caused the downfall. You could argue the same with the French Revolution and some of those things, but I don't think there's a precedent in history where the ruling class really was looking at the country and saying, we just really need to tear this thing down. I don't think that's ever happened.
I can think of one. Prince in the Revolution. You never heard of those people other than Sheila E. She was on Arsenio Hall.
Vanity 6.
Oh, Vanity.
Sheila Easton.
He did all right for himself. The Revolution, not so well.
Well, that's true. He started out with Time, didn't he? Didn't he start out with Morris Day?
I believe so.
I think so. Didn't he?
Morris Day doesn't get the credit that he should.
Nor do Tommy Tune and Jimmy Jam. Those guys were both in Time, too.
If it wasn't for Janet Jackson, no one would know who Jimmy Jam was.
Well, but he wrote music for lots of people.
I know, but I'm just saying
I think those two guys produced just a ridiculous amount of records back in the...
It was Arista Records, I think?
I think so.
Yeah. They were huge. They had everything.
Those two guys were
I'd have put them in charge of something.
Yeah.
Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, and Prince, honestly, he doesn't get the credit he deserves for how talented he was. That dude could play every instrument.
You know what? That's a good place to end for this week. We're going to try to book Prince next week.
He can probably vote.
He did in Minnesota 3 times. That's it for this week on Objections with Stan Willis. We will see you next week.